Hey everyone, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 560 being recorded Wednesday, October 9th, 2019. I'm Jim Tannis.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Sebastian Peak.
And we're glad you could join us. For those on the video version, I have no video because I'm just a mess and we don't need to share that. So I'll spare you all and I'll show you instead this picture of me from 10 years and at least 50 pounds ago. And we'll just enjoy that. And also, you'll notice Josh is not with us. He is at ARM Tech Con. Is that the correct reference?
I don't know. Yeah, that's with the hashtag on everything that he's been tweeting out. But I know it's TechCon and ARM's doing it.
Yeah, it's an ARM-based conference in Los Angeles, I think, or somewhere in California, I believe.
Why did I think he was in London? Maybe that was last year he went to London.
No, it's Qualcomm.
Okay. Well,
he's not
Qualcomm.
Here.
Qualcomm ships them overseas.
I see.
Well, he's enjoying a few days with the folks from ARM and learning about some great stuff there that he'll be able to tell us about hopefully soon. But let's get into today's show. Do I hear? Is that
you do? I'm going to text my wife to let her know that my son is jumping up and down and screaming at probably a YouTube video. He was watching YouTube videos of hamsters going through like Lego mazes when I came down here.
That'd be my response as well. I mean,
yeah. I wasn't sure if it was like dogs barking or shouting. I just something joyous.
No, he's joyous. Yeah. I asked her to do something about it. So let's move on.
Okay, well. We're glad you could join us. We record live, usually Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. That works out to 2 a.m. UTC Thursday mornings. And you can join us at pcper.com/live. And if you want to know when we go live, you can head over to pcper.com/subscribe to be notified, about an hour or so before our live events. We don't use it for anything else, just to give you a heads up when I remember, of course, as Mere PPC in our Discord chat would scold me about. I sometimes forget, but I remember today. So that's great. One more bit of housekeeping I wanted to bring up just at the top here. As you may know, we do our podcast. We distribute it via video on YouTube and via audio through MP3 RSS feeds that you can subscribe to in your podcast app. But we also have an RSS video feed, and we've had that for a couple years now. But I was looking at the statistics for it. About 0.5% of our total audience actually uses that, but because it's video and they're large files, it's several $100s a month to host. So my question to you all is, for those using it, are you actually using it and relying on it? Because I know sometimes you can subscribe to a podcast and kind of forget about it, and it just kind of auto downloads every week. Because if you're finding use in it and it's important to you, it's worth keeping. But if it's really not being used by you guys and you can instead get the video over at YouTube, it might be worth something. Looking at something we can trim to keep costs manageable. Because as we've said, this is not a very profitable operation, so we're trying to keep things in line here. So please send us a tweet, or maybe I might try to get like a straw poll up or something. I probably should have done that ahead of time, but give us some feedback in the comments or an email or whatever. Let us know if you find that RSS video feed particularly useful, and just so we know what you're using. But let's jump into the news this week. As we started, I think it was last show, we're kind of switching the order. Normally, like historically, we did reviews first, but as Sebastian pointed out, sometimes it's probably better to just do news first. Now, of course, if there's a huge review, we'll start off with that, but for most weeks, we'll do news first. And so we'll jump into the news this week. This is sort of an extension of what we talked about last week, and that, of course, is Intel's product launch of both their high-end desktop parts, which leaked last week, and now also their Xeon W or workstation parts, based on the same platform, but with some different capabilities, some different pricing, and also Intel had some additional pricing news as well. So tell us, what did Intel officially announce earlier this week?
Well, like as you alluded to, and we talked about this last week, they talked about the new Core X series because it had already leaked. So they made this decision. Of course, we were briefed. All the media was briefed on all of these products together. And then because the Core X series had already kind of been public at that point. They said, you know what, these 2 slides, you can talk about these, you can't talk about the new Xeons. So we knew about that, and last week we kind of went through this. It's 4 new SKUs. It's high-end desktop, and while we could talk about the performance numbers, we could talk about PCIe lanes or the clock speeds that they're targeting here, or the new memory speed, which has gone up each generation. Now we're up to DDR4 2933 is the standard. The big story, of course, is pricing, because these are about half the price of high-end desktop last time around. We're still on the same architecture. It's Skylake X, but instead of $1899.99, if you go on Amazon right now and try to buy the 99, is it the 9980 XE? I think is the current product name for an 18 core 36 thread monster. It's almost $2,000, and the pricing here, and that we don't know retail pricing. This is it's US dollar 1K. This is like 1K tray price. So if you were to order 1,000 units, $979. So somewhere around $1,000. And the initial price of that previous Extreme Edition, I think, was over 2,000 when it launched, the actual suggested pricing on it. So we're talking a cut by 50% across the board, with processors starting at 590 for a 10 core 20 thread part, which, I don't know. I feel like this instantly changes the conversation about coming up with a workstation for the creative or just the enthusiast, which is what they're aiming at. Like, they're marketing X series now at like enthusiasts and creators, and they're marketing the new W-2200 series to the professionals in the workstation environment. But that is obviously a different product segment. It's a different price segment. There are features you get, of course, with Xeon. There's nothing new as far as what you get from a Xeon versus what they will kind of allow from the consumer parts. ECC memory is one of them. The rest of it, like memory support, is significantly greater. You get 4 times the memory capacity if you're on a Xeon W workstation. So if you're content with 256 gigs, you can actually go with the Core X series. If you don't need ECC memory, the memory standard is the same with the W-2200 series. Still quad channel 2933. Pricing starts at $294. That's for the W-2223, which is a 4-core 8-thread part. And of course, I've already seen some comments about 4 cores in 2019 for $294, but it's a different market, and we don't really cover the server side of things. Serve the Home is the outlet that we typically reference when we're talking about server stuff, and they've gone up and down testing like the different levels of Xeons and what really they usually recommend stepping up to a higher SKU, even if it costs a little bit more at the outset. But these processors go all the way up to $1,333. That's for the Xeon W29 or 2295, I should say, which has a single core turbo of actually 4.6 gigahertz, which is a turbo max of 4.8. I don't think they've ever gone this high. Am I wrong? Has there ever been a Xeon with even a single core turbo of approaching 5 gigahertz before?
No, they were pretty proud about that. That was one of their key points about this, was hitting 4.8 as a and again, these are your single core max, very momentary turbos. But again, that's how all these parts are judged on their turbo. But that was their big leap, and I believe they distinguished the way that Intel, when they were briefing us, distinguished these parts was if you want frequency, you're an enthusiast, you're an overclocker, or the workload you need is more dependent on frequency, you go with the X series. And if your workload is based on stability, or you need the ECC support and that, you go or the additional RAM capacity, you go with Xeon W. Of course, many others would say, well, if you need either of those things, you go with EPYC or Ryzen. But that's they've made a case here, and they've killed it on pricing in terms of I mean, think about what the heck were their margins if they can afford to do this. And again, maybe they can't afford to. Yeah, maybe they can't afford not exactly. They can't afford not to. So who knows? They're taking they're making no money, or they're taking a loss just to maintain market share. But man, the the margins on those previous parts, the highest priced part in this generation of X series is cheaper than the lowest price on Skylake Refresh, the 9000 series, and that's just insane.
But even looking at the Xeon, go ahead. Sorry,
I was going to say, when you spend years and years competing against yourself, there was nobody else on the server market except them, so they had to. Well, we've got to get you to buy the new round. We'll know it's super expensive and awesome, and you're going to love it. And it was better as well. And not to be completely facetious, but they just picked the price that they could sell it at because where else are you going to go?
Yeah, and I think we see that too. And they shared some performance numbers here. We don't have these yet for testing, but they talked about as Sebastian noted in the article, comparing both previous gen as well as 3-year-old. And this is something I saw, and I don't know if they've been doing this for a long time, because again, I'm relatively new to covering this stuff. But when they had Cascade Lake for server launch earlier this year, they talked about a 5-year upgrade cycle. So they're because there's been relatively little progress, again, still on Skylake X, still on 14 nanometer plus. They've got to talk about these longer term upgrades. But they're not wrong. I mean, people aren't upgrading their servers or their desktops every year, so it's good to have this data. But it really shows, how relatively small, in increments in performance we're getting generation to generation, since Intel's been stuck on this process node. But looking here at 4K video editing for Xeon W, 11% faster gen over gen, 97% faster looking at 3 years ago. Architectural rendering is again 10% gen over gen, 2x over 3 years ago, and game development pretty much the same, 10% over last year and 2.1 over 3 years ago. So yeah, I mean, good to see pricing, good to see price competitiveness, and about time. Because for us in particular, it's PCIe lanes. It's not the cores, it's not the memory even so much. It's just the lanes. Intel's mainstream desktop and AMD's, to be fair, are pretty much starved for PCIe, especially with new NVMe storage using up those lanes. And so you put a graphics card in there. Let's say you want to put a 10 gig NIC in there. You got a couple M.2 drives, and now suddenly you're having to jostle things around. You got to make sure you don't plug a SATA drive in where you've got that third PCIe slot filled, and vice versa. So going up to these 72 lanes, and having that option at a cheaper price, at less of a leap from the 9900K to now your HEDT parts is good. It's a good improvement. But there was also some news about pricing for some other parts, some minor changes in pricing, right, Sebastian?
Some of the percentages are actually bigger than I thought at first. I haven't compiled everything. I know some of the outlets actually went ahead and I think Tom's had a chart where they looked at the original manufacturer suggested pricing versus what the new RCP pricing is for this 9th gen. We're talking about the F processors, the processors without graphics. And one of my favorite processors to point to if somebody is talking to me about a build, right now, if you think about it, Ryzen, and we'll talk about a new Ryzen product later, but Ryzen currently starts at the 3600, which is $200. So if you're looking at a pure gaming system, you don't need integrated graphics, that 9400F, which has been selling for anywhere between 130 and 140, is such a good buy because you're getting, around 4 gigahertz boost clocks. It's 6 cores. You don't really need hyper threading for most gaming. It doesn't make much of a difference. So that's a tremendous bargain. That actually had an original RCP price of 182, I believe. And on this chart now, that's down to 157. Those prices start at $97 for the 9100F. That's a drop. All of these are a drop of a fairly significant amount, all the way up to the 9900KF at the top, which is going to have a 1K price of $463. So I would love to see in like 3 months of where these are actually sitting as far as like Amazon Newegg retail pricing for one CPU. But it looks like just from that one 9400F that I'm very familiar with, they've lowered the price by about $25. So I would, if that trickles down into the retail channels, we'll see these processors selling for like $119 potentially, which would be it'll be very interesting to see what AMD does, or if maybe they were anticipating AMD coming out with like a 3500. And we've seen all these leaks, and Jeremy did write up news, which I'm sure we'll be talking about shortly, about processors going into the OEM channel. But for Intel right now, they actually have a little bit of a better deal if you're on a very strict budget. Unless you go with Ryzen 2nd Gen, you can actually build yourself quite a good system. Like I'm looking at the 9700F, and the 9700K is the CPU I build our current GPU test bench with. 8 cores, not hyper-threaded, good clock speeds, and that now has a list of 298. We had been seeing that processor selling for about $329 for the K version. F, obviously a little bit lower end, SKU, 65 watt TDP, but still an interesting prospect to look at how they have gone back to their current 9th gen offerings and said, we're just going to cut prices across the board, which I think we've talked about this. We've kind of expected them to give their existing product stack a bit of a price drop. Even if they didn't announce anything officially, you see those prices start to fall a little bit in the retail channels. But now the suggested pricing is falling. I would love to see retails fall as well.
Yeah. And as you said, AMD certainly has something to say about that. But
yes.
Speaking of AMD, so anyway, we're recapping that, I guess. Have we been sampled yet on any of these?
I haven't seen anything. No.
Okay,
No new stuff. Nothing since. I don't know if we saw 9th gen at the old office or not, but right now, other than desktop 9th gen, no. So we're still waiting to see about the high-end desktop stuff. So
we'll see as this stuff kind of finally gets into the market. We'll see if Intel sends us stuff, and if not, we'll see if we have to go out and just get some and take a look and see how their claims at this new price point compare to both, of course, Ryzen 2nd gen Threadripper, which is still in the market, and this upcoming 3rd gen Threadripper, which is going to be the real key to all of this, seeing where AMD brings the specs and pricing for that. But speaking of AMD, we've got some announcements from them. Obviously, we know that the Navi product line, the Navi generation, launched in July with the 5700 and 5700 XT. And now it's time to bring it to more of a mainstream price category, I guess. And that's what AMD did with the announcement this week of the Radeon RX 5500 and 5500M, the mobile variant of that. And Sebastian, you wrote this up for us. Tell us what AMD's bringing with this.
Well, this is another one of those things that was actually right around the same time as Intel was briefing us on new processors. AMD came calling with news to share with the media. We got to ask questions about this new RX 5500 series that was coming out, and it's a simultaneous launch of both a desktop and a laptop part. Now, I would say that this announcement definitely favors like system integrators, OEMs, specifically laptop makers, though there will be desktop RX 5500 parts available. Though they did clarify for us that they're not providing a reference design. So this nice render that we use to lead off as a featured image for the article is just that. There's no actual nano looking version of this card, unfortunately. But what we're talking about here is their mainstream push. This is a 1080p gaming card, and the specs are not staggering. We're talking about a 22 compute unit GPU that's both the mobile and the desktop variants of this. The big difference between the mobile and the desktop, two things. One, clock speeds, of course, and that's something that is a bit configurable. Like OEMs, if they're building a bigger laptop or have a better thermal solution, they could clock the GPU up higher. But the desktop nominally has much higher clock speeds. Desktop can also go up to 8 gigabytes of GDDR6, while the laptop will be capped at 4 gigabytes of GDDR6, at least for now. And the clock speeds that were announced were a game clock of 1717 megahertz for the desktop variant and 1448 for the mobile variant, and a boost clock of up to 1845 for the desktop and up to 1645 for laptop. Otherwise, these are Navi. They are 7 nanometer. They, I mean, I don't know why it's that important for something like this, but they are PCI Express 4.0 devices. One of the things that was a little confusing, I think, when they made the announcement and that we had to get it clarified, even though the desktop variant is available with up to 8 gigabytes of GDDR6, and the base configuration is 4 gigs of 128-bit GDDR6, they're actually still using 128-bit when you move up to 8 gigabytes. So they're using greater memory density to get up to 8 gigs without increasing the interface. You would have thought they'd go to like 256 for another, like a higher end variant of this, but their argument is that since they're targeting 1080p gaming, they don't really need the extra bandwidth from the memory. We will see. Obviously, we have no real numbers on this. They showed us that compared to GCN, Graphics Core Next, and their charts were actually referencing an RX 480, not a 580. Was about a 1.6x performance per watt increase. They say 1.7x performance per area. Of course, that's dropping from a 14 nanometer RX 480 down to a 7 nanometer for the RX 5500. We're dealing with a much smaller die, 158 millimeters squared. The old RX 480 was 221 millimeters squared. I won't even get into some of the weirdness that people on Twitter were talking about afterwards with the actual system that they use to measure the performance per watt, which made no sense. And I'll just briefly say, like, this is I wouldn't say it's necessarily petty. It's just interesting. AMD, who is rightfully very proud of their current desktop CPU lineup, especially with Ryzen 3000. The Zen 2 core is phenomenal. It's very close to Intel in single core performance, single threaded performance, and obviously is just killing it as far as multi-threaded. And yet, AMD, when they release these numbers, if you look at the actual system that they use, they were using like a 5000 series Extreme Edition Intel processor, like an older system, and
yeah, I think
kind of didn't really make any sense.
It was like a 5960X, so it has one.
Yeah.
On like on a version of Windows that was like 3 updates out of date, and it was like they had data from the 480 and they couldn't reproduce it for some reason, so they just brought the data forward and compared it to it was interesting. It was bizarre. But,
and trust me, the temptation is always there. I really wish I could just say, PC Perspective has been reviewing graphics cards for like 20 years now. I could just go back and, I could test a new graphics card on Windows Vista against this old one. Obviously, you can't do that. I can't even go back and test freaking Windows 10 results from more than 6 or 7 months ago because the builds are significantly different, and there are certain features you can't even enable unless you have a certain build number or higher. When I started, it's only been like 11 months, 10 months, and I was on Windows 10 1803. That is ancient history. You can't be on 1803. You got to be at least 1809, and now it's 1903. And of course, the next one is around the corner. I'll be forced to upgrade. And it changes the results, and you have to redo all the benchmarks. So I get it if AMD didn't want to drag a 480 out again. We did ask, why not a 590? How does this sit in relation to the RX 590 that's out there on the market? And each time a member of the media would ask a performance question, basically it was the same kind of canned, we're really targeting 1080 performance with this launch, and we know we're really excited about the performance of this at 1080p in gaming. So the results, they remain to be seen. If this ends up coming out and it doesn't quite match a 590, but it hits a certain price point, consumes less power, I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot of these 5500s in notebooks. One has already been announced in MSI, and then probably a lot of them in like your mainstream gaming desktop PCs as that entry-level 1080p, like solid 1080p gaming card to go against the 1650 from NVIDIA, which I think is what they were targeting with this launch specifically.
And Apple's got a MacBook scheduled for release I think next month.
Oh, really?
Towards the end of this month. Isn't that
Neat.
still the rumor that there's going to be a new 16-inch MacBook Pro?
And it will actually have a real keyboard, I think. Weren't they going
Ooh.
backwards and
Well,
they're going
I
away
don't
from the
know.
butterfly back to a scissor mechanism? That's the rumor I
Perhaps.
heard.
Well, that would make sense because Dell's going the opposite way and is now putting out really crap keyboards in some of their newer ones.
Yeah, I've been that XPS 13 2-in-1 that we tested for Ice Lake. I do not like that keyboard. It is frustrating.
Yeah, I'm seeing newer generation Latitude 4800s, and it's just it's awful.
The Ryzen based ThinkPad. I mean the Ryzen is irrelevant, but the ThinkPad keyboard was superior, far superior. But well, all right. Well, sticking with AMD news, we've got some more announcements. As we alluded to earlier, we saw some teases about this, and we weren't sure were these going to be retail parts or OEM parts, but it looks like AMD is out with some additional Ryzen SKUs heading exclusively to the OEMs. Tell us about this, Jeremy.
It's nothing new. So if anyone is screaming and yelling, how dare they even start thinking about doing this? Like, we've seen this before. So can it? But the Ryzen 9 3900 is the more interesting of the two, in that it's got almost the exact same specs as the 3900X, except it's running a little bit slower, with the base of 3.1 gigahertz and a boost of 4.3. So you lose a little bit of frequency, but it's got a TDP of 65 watts, which is just amazing for anyone looking at a low power system or a small form factor system. That would just be amazing, because otherwise you're looking at either 95 watts or 125. Or is it 140?
For what?
Some of the higher end, yeah. Some of the lowers are 95, and I think the others are either 125 or 140.
I don't think it's 140, but
yeah, so 125. Yeah. So that's a huge difference in the amount of power this thing is sucking in and the amount of heat it's producing. So, on the one side, there are a lot of modders that would love to get their hands on this thing, but at the same time, it's great for OEM builds, which, generally don't have the greatest cooling going around and are stressing towards a smaller form factor. So I expect we're going to see this in the Dells and Lenovo's of the world coming up on the next generation refresh. The Ryzen 5 3500X, on the other hand, is not just OEM only. It's Chinese OEM only. We probably won't even be seeing it for sale at all over here, even on some of the systems, unless you're willing to go over there and get one shipped to you. Same thing. It's got a 65 watt TDP, and it drops down a little bit in the frequencies. So you got 6 single threaded cores, and they can run between 3.6 to 4.1 gigahertz. So definitely something for the value conscious person who's looking for a processor that's really not going to add much price to the system, but at the same time is going to do just about anything you want it to at that price point.
I bet you Blizzard can get all of those that they want. If we can get political for a minute. No.
And that's it. We're banned.
Thankfully we don't have any financial obligations to Winnie the Pooh, but
until 10-cent DDoS is us.
Yeah, well, that's.
Or I mean,
10 cent. Yeah. And that's getting into the OEMs with Ryzen. I mean, it's this continued push because AMD was so absent at any level of performance prior to Ryzen. You go into the Best Buy and you look at all the systems, and there were some AMD powered systems, and they were usually the very, very low price, very low performance systems, and all the fancy stuff, all the powerful stuff was Intel, and now seeing more and more, we're seeing them get more and more server options. We're seeing them in more and more laptops, and now seeing more and more of this OEM pre-built desktop stuff is great. Getting more choice in the market. So be on the lookout for that. If you're looking for a pre-built, way to get a pretty good amount of cores and threads at a low TDP. And
And then
man,
tear it apart to get the processor and build yourself something new.
yeah,
Or,
or eBay it at that point. Yeah, send it to your favorite modder. But continuing with AMD, I got a lot of AMD news this week. We had some benchmarks over at it was Phoronix. Yeah, Phoronix. They put the EPYC 7642 against the Xeon Platinum 8280. And let me see if I can pull these up here. Oh, load. There we go. And so, this is, if you know Phoronix, very detailed, Linux focused testing. And I was looking through these charts earlier, and I think, the results are pretty much the same as we've seen everywhere else, where EPYC either wins outright, or where it doesn't win, you have to then look at that price tag where it's half or less of the Intel part, and make the call that way. So there are some situations where it loses, or I'm sorry, where it does lose to Intel. I'm looking for one of the charts here.
You won't find many.
Yeah, there's not many. There were a couple, but again, that price to performance, pretty impressive.
Is obnoxious.
Yeah,
if you could find a 7642, I think the last time I saw them, they were $5,400. So call it between $5,000 to $6,000. The Platinum 8280, which is similar on the face of it, if not necessarily on the inside, it will cost you more than $10,000 for one. A lot of the benchmarks, they were actually using paired 8280s, and they were still getting spanked.
Yep. And we saw that as well with Serve the Home's Geekbench comparison. That was the 70, that was the higher end EPYC. Was it 7742? I can't remember the product number, but that was the higher end EPYC against it was two EPYCs versus four 8200 series Intel parts. And no, it was 8180s was the comparison, but still it was like $14,000 of Intel or of AMD parts versus 50 some $1,000 of Intel parts, and the AMD parts beat it handily. So more proof there. Again, it's going to be hard. I mean, the enterprise market is a slow moving beast. There's a lot of agreements and relationships that they have to overcome with suppliers and vendors, but looking like
cutting your prices in half is a good idea.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, the price, there are still workloads. Sure, you can find a workload where an Intel part beats the AMD part, but they're not as common. And even where it does beat it, you're still looking at a huge price difference. Yeah. So very encouraging.
And there's a security aspect as well, because even with the newer gens, not every single mitigation has been fixed yet.
That's true. The specter of your specter is hanging over you on the Intel side mostly these days. More AMD news. We've got some news. Obviously, the 3950X, which is going to be the flagship Ryzen 3000 part, that 16 core mainstream desktop part, that was delayed from September until November. But we've got some leaks now, courtesy of Gigabyte. So they've obviously got their hands on some samples already, and they accidentally published some information in their overclocking guide. It looks like folks over at Hexus found that an image in the Geekbench guide showed the Ryzen 9 3950X with a 4.3 gigahertz all-core boost at 1.4 volts, with a peak of up to 4.7 to 4. I guess it was 4.7. I'm sorry, on two cores for the boost there. And it's hard to see this screenshot. It's a little bit low resolution, but it was some CPU-Z screenshots while running Cinebench. And if that turns out to be true, if they can truly hit those numbers on the majority of their samples, that's going to position it very well. You're still going to look at a frequency disadvantage against like the 9900K and this upcoming 9900KS. But when you double the cores and double the threads, that disappears in most workloads pretty quickly.
Jeremy, did this news give you chills?
Up and down my spine.
to see that kind of performance. I'm not alluding to anything in general, nothing about a 28 core on a chiller to hit certain clock speeds.
Yeah.
But, hey, I wonder if AMD sanctioned this leak because, you know, there were also these rumors a couple weeks ago about, well, the reason this delay is because they're just not hitting those clock speeds. And, well, suddenly here we are getting excited about 3950X clock speeds. Well played, AMD.
Well, I think, you know, their official explanation, which does seem to make sense and seems to be proving true, is they didn't want a paper launch. They didn't want to just, you know, officially launch that 3950X and have no stock anywhere. So this allows them, this gives them the time to ramp up production and get things ready. So I'm sure it will still be very hard to find. I'm sure this will sell out immediately, but at least there'll be an adequate supply. You won't have to fight to the death at your local micro center. But I mean, maybe you still will. But
I mean, we don't encourage it, but if you do, can you please send us a video?
I was gonna say, if you do it, just record it, send us the YouTube link. You don't have to send us a hard copy. You know, it says 2019. Just link us, and we'd love to watch it.
Instead of shouting World Star, I want you to shout PC Per. No, I'm sorry. You should shout Josh Tech.
Yeah,
yes,
Josh Tech.
That's definitely a Josh Tech event.
Josh Tech.
If you're wearing a Josh Tech T-shirt and you shout Josh Tech while hitting a fellow customer with a graphics card,
or a steering wheel, either one.
Helms in the chat has informed me that I'm wrong again. Look, Helms, just because I agree with Paul Thurrott on Twitter about something one time doesn't mean that I'm always wrong for the rest of time. Maybe it does. Maybe I've just always been wrong, I guess.
What was the topic that you and Paul agreed on?
He posted a picture of this really sweet looking kind of Mac OS Linux inspired Windows 10 desktop and said, this is what Windows 10 should look like by now. And apparently he uses some cocktail of utilities to tweak the appearance of Windows 10. It has a different looking start menu. It has a completely different looking dock. It's like centered. It didn't look like, I don't know. It's hard. It just looked like a very, very clean, very kind of Mac inspired version of Windows 10, which is apparently how he has his setup. I'm thinking, you know, that would look nice, especially on a Mac running Boot Camp, like if the Windows kind of seamlessly had like that Mac look to it. But anyway, apparently that's not allowed.
Oh, well, I mean, you can, they're like, is it StarDock is the company? They have a number of tools that kind of let you customize the look. I mean, I've seen Mac-ish.
Wasn't that the old DRM spyware company?
Really? StarDock?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
StarDock?
I thought they were.
Oh,
legit.
it's an old one.
Oh, okay.
Googling
Galciv 3 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're one of their games is Galactic Civilizations.
I love this. Maybe I have something.
Yeah, Sins of the Solar Empire. Oh yeah.
I've bought some of their games and utilities. I've never had a problem.
I just accidentally
the Sony one, but
oh yeah, the rootkit. Yeah. I just accidentally. I have to say, I just accidentally binged it instead of Googling it because I had Edge open for some reason, and I just got this site is not secure warning, and it's just going to Bing.com to search for, you know, StarDock. So
nope. If I was Bing, I'd be insecure too. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, and let me just conclude that little aside by stating that the official position of PC Per is that we love Paul Thurrott. He's a sweetheart.
You know, he has such a soothing voice. He sounds almost exactly like Seth MacFarlane doing Brian the dog to me.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I've always imagined Windows Weekly when I used to listen to it, and I mean, I occasionally still do, but I'm busy. But I used to listen to it and just imagine that it was Brian the dog doing a Windows podcast. So that's my experience with it.
I never made that connection, but now that you say it, I can definitely see.
Yeah,
I can now hear it.
Yeah, it's the Boston thing. It's the voice. Yeah. Jim is the best. Jim, yeah, thank you, Helms.
Whose leg do I have to hump around here to get a DLL installed?
Indeed.
Exactly. In fact, there's this whole series of Family Guy memes with Brian with Paul's voice doing stuff. There's a guy who actually like syncs the audio and does these.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah,
couple of them are.
Follow Mr. Thurrott. You can find these videos.
Yeah, a couple of those are pretty good. But let's finish up the news here. We've got a little bit of a correction for some who may have seen the news and had a heart attack. Obviously, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is an upcoming anticipated Star Wars game, and the initial specs were published for it with a recommendation of a minimum, or was it a minimum or a recommended?
No, that was the recommended.
Recommended of 32 gigs of RAM for the PC version of this game, and which would be, I think, the highest recommended.
I did some quick Googling. I saw nothing even close to that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen.
No,
that was crazy.
Even 16 is kind of outrageous, but I was loving the outrageousness of the 32 gigs. This makes me sad.
Well, you know, for someone like you who has all that hardware, it's like, haha.
I laugh at that. Like, you're crying about 32 gigs of RAM. You know how much RAM I have within arm's reach right now? And then I realized that I've become that entitled hardware reviewer who just expects like memory to be coming in every day on the FedEx truck. But yeah, 32 is outrageous.
Yeah, you get our cases.
Yeah, but they corrected it. It is apparently 16, as Sebastian says. It was only 16 gigs of RAM for the recommended
16
specs.
It's still pretty. Think about all the laptop, gamers who only have 8, and now it's going to be like. Sorry if it's soldered in. Yeah,
well, I mean,
sorry if it's soldered in. You got to use Thunderbolt 3 RAM now.
Oh man. The recommended GPUs are a GTX 1070 or an RX Vega 56, so that's fairly high as well. So you're looking at some of these older laptops. Anyone who's going to have a laptop with a GPU at or above that is probably going to have the option. Like they may not have taken advantage of it at purchase, but may have the option to get to that 16 gigs. But
Well, I mean, if you're rocking the minimum, it's like a GTX 650 or an HD 7750 and 8 gigs. So that you can find a laptop capable of.
Yeah. And
maybe somewhere in between there.
I mean, it remains to be seen how minimum the minimum is, Well, that's an objective experience.
Can you run this on a 32-bit operating system? That's going to be the ultimate test. Because, that can't even address more than 4 gigs of total memory, including the GPU. Right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess not.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna rely.
I just wanted this.
So.
Oh, that's gonna take up like 8 gigs on its own.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
that's why it's 16 gigs. So they did some internal testing. They said, okay, if we just give them the game on a DVD, then it would actually run just fine on 8 gigs. But because of Origin in the background, plus Windows 10, Cortana alone is probably taking up about a gigabyte of your memory. That's an exaggeration. If you have any Chrome tabs open at all in the background, there's another 2 or 3 gigs gone.
Oh, so your system should have 32 gigs of RAM so that you can scrape 16 for the game.
Exactly. So PC Perspective's official stance on this new game, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, is that you need 32 gigabytes of RAM if you're running Windows 10. If you're running Windows 7...
I'd say you need that if you're going to run Excel on Windows 10, let alone a game.
Well,
and then Red Dead Redemption didn't want to be outdone.
Well, that's
RDR2,
true. Yeah,
150 gigs local install.
Wow. Well, what was GTA
Not
5?
Counting.
That was close to 100. It was like 80.
It was close to 100.
Yeah.
Battlefield after that giant HDR, or not HDR, but high textures crept up to 70 or 80. But 150.
Well, go out and get yourself one of those like 1 terabyte QLC drives for 100 and something bucks, and there you go. You can have 5 Red Dead installs going for your mods, which actually they'll probably limit because they want to make money off microtransactions.
Yes.
We sound old, Jim, because think about it. Like, it wasn't that long ago that a 270 megabyte hard drive was kind of a big deal to have in your PC.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're complaining because a game takes 150 gigabytes. Why don't you have 20 terabytes of storage in your computer? Why not? It's available. In fact, you could buy 2 10 terabyte drives right now and RAID them which I don't know why you'd ever want to do that, but do a RAID
Because you can.
RAID 0, and then have a 20 terabyte boot drive. And those drives aren't ever actually that slow. I think you get to the point with some of these really dense drives and just straight line speeds are probably faster than one of those QLC NVMe drives. But
certainly once you've exceeded the cache. Yeah. A single hard drive it will go faster than a QLC beyond its cache. But anyway, if you want to play some of these games, here's a graphics card you might want to consider.
Okay. How long have you been waiting to use that segue? I forgot I even wrote any reviews. Like, what? Oh yeah, graphics card. I did that.
I've had the tab queued up here. It's the MSI GeForce RTX 2070 Super Gaming X Trio. I believe I have when we descended on the old office like scavengers, I think I took the 2080 version of this. But this
so you know all about this monster.
Version. And it's performed pretty well for me, at least the 2080 variant. How's this 27? No, this is regular 2080, not 2080 Super. So how's this super duper version?
I can't remember how this performed versus a 20. It's slightly, if you're just talking about performance out of the box, it's slightly above the performance of the 2070 Super Founders Edition. It is a little bit cooler, and when you look at it, there's kind of a couple things going on here. One, you have a giant, heavy heatsink, triple fan, unique fan blade design. You have a couple of different types of blades that are kind of, it's like alternate blades to create additional static pressure, and they've kind of optimized it for low noise. They have a very, very, words are failing me right now. The fan profile is very conservative. Yeah. I mean, I was recording fan speeds during benchmarks, and I had that data from GPU-Z. If I go to the test results here, I was getting anywhere from 1128. I maxed out at 1274 RPM. That is not high for a GPU to be at around the 1200 RPM average. This thing was extremely quiet. So yes, out of the box, there's a very small overclock. I think it's only about 30 megahertz. You could certainly overclock this higher. You could certainly get better thermals out of it. The way they've tailored this out of the box is for extremely low noise. And 32.3 dBA is what I got for my SPL meter, the same one I've been using for the last couple of years. I position the meter, by the way, 1 foot away from the graphics card on this open test bench right here. I have it on a tripod. So directly facing all three fans from 12 inches away, it was still only giving me 32.3 dBA. It was almost inaudible, and you actually won't hear it over most CPU fans under load unless you tweak the fan profile yourself. So just for that alone, it's ultra quiet performance and within 1 degree of a Founders Edition under the same loads. I thought was tremendous. I used this card actually in the last case review I did, which was the Fractal Design Vector case. And it has a passive, like a 0 RPM idle, but the way the heatsink is designed, air flows through it quite well just from case fans. I saw a reduction of about 10 degrees in the case. This on the test bench, it was idling at like 38C, and then it was down in the low 30s inside the case. So I was very impressed with this overall. I mean, the only issue I have with it is the price, but I kind of understand the price. It's $70 more than the base $499 price, the theoretical price of a 2070 Founders Edition, the Super Founders Edition, which, you know, if you can find that on NVIDIA.com, when I was looking, it was still out of stock. But if you can find one out there for $500, you're going to get within a percentage or two of the performance of this. So you're not really getting a lot out of the box as far as just frames per second with this. You're buying this for its kind of crazy overbuilt twin or triple Frozer design. It's the Torx fans are really, really quiet. It's the quietest graphics card I've tested so far. Still performs well, still has good thermals, but you're paying for it. And I didn't get into the RGB stuff very much in the review. There's one picture in there that kind of shows it in all of its RGB-ness. But you can synchronize this with your other RGB components. I could have had this the same like purple color scheme the motherboard was set to. So you're paying a little bit extra from multi-zone addressable RGBs, of course. And you're also getting a card that, like, they kind of went all out with this. I didn't have a picture of it in the review. I should have, but it comes with a metal bracket. One of those brackets you can buy separately for like $10 to $20 that helps prevent sag, because this thing is long and it's very heavy. So it was kind of a nice add-in. So adding it all up, $70 more for ultra quiet performance, the capability of being overclocked, and I didn't obviously get into overclocking results in the review, but it's an impressive card. Like Jim was saying, like they've been doing this for a little while now. This is their return to that triple fan design, and it's kind of amazing what you can do with a graphics card like this, like a GPU like the 2070 Super. If you put 3 big, very slow spinning fans on a big heatsink, it's like those old third party like Arctic cooling. I used to have 2 HD 5870s back in the day in my system, and I had put the Arctic triple fan coolers on them because I couldn't stand the blower noise. And that's kind of like that's the sound profile of these. Just a little bit of air noise, and it's kind of fantastic. But $570 is the asking price. Still gave it the gold award. I probably would have gotten Editor's Choice if it was like $529. You were getting all of this, but I think they've made a fairly good case for the additional price. I don't know if you guys find that, you know, if the value is there or not, but I couldn't find it for less than like $570 on the market. So
one thing I'll point out, assuming that this is the exact same dimensions as the 2080 I have, which it appears to be, it's 328 millimeters long. And if you'll notice on this picture at the very right end, there's a little bit of a point where it kind of just points out at an angle there. And it's in both the NZXT S340 and the Fractal, I think it's the R5 I have, Define R5. If you have a all-in-one, like a 240 or 280 millimeter radiator cooler for your CPU, and you mount it in the front, which is where I typically mount mine in cases like those, it's too long. And that little point just sticks in and just hits the radiator, and it just doesn't allow it to seat properly. So your options are, it's just plastic. It's not, you know, you could
just
file
get a
it
file
down.
out.
Yeah, you could file it down. It's, you know, probably a couple centimeters, cut it off. Although that might, if you remove it entirely, it might affect the structure of that third fan there. But just, you know, keep in mind it's 328 millimeters long. Make sure you take measurements, because it's one of the biggest cards that I had used, one of the longest.
hey, MSI is the company that brought us the Lightning cards, remember? So
Yeah.
they're kind of proud of their giant cards. And of course, it's taller too. So there are certain cases where you just don't have the clearance between like the top of the expansion slots and like the case side panel or tempered glass panel. So you got to have a good 1.25 inches or so above the actual retention bracket with this as well. And a lot of that is shroud, like Jim's saying. And yeah, that back piece does definitely come to a point. If I get my hair out of the way here so you can see it. So yeah, just break it off. Who cares? Break it off.
I guess so. But
Don't even have to remove it from the case.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
or if you jam it in hard enough, it'll break off.
Look, you
on the
get
radiator.
You get a butter knife and you just go to town on it. And eventually you will either injure yourself badly, completely break the card. Don't do this while the computer is running. It's another tip.
Oh,
And also, yeah,
I figured the
we do
heat would
not
make it easier to file.
Yeah, and I absolve myself of any liability whatsoever. It is Jim's operation. Jim would be liable if you hurt yourself in that instance.
And today, kids, we're going to talk about what judgment proof means. But anyway, let's finish up with the second review here. It's another one from Sebastian. It's a Thunderbolt 3 dock from StarTech. Obviously, StarTech is known. You know, they've got a product for everything, it seems, and generally on the cheaper end of the pricing spectrum. And this one is their dual 4K 60 power. Is that the official name?
No, I added that. That's my like power word for the title.
Okay.
But it's actually, it just rolls off the tongue. It's the TB3CDK2DP.
Oh,
And this is actually the full name of this product, if I can find it here, is the Thunderbolt 3 dock with USB-C laptop compatibility. So I actually found it easier to go by the part number than that entire huge name. So I used the part number quite a bit in the review, but here's what's interesting about it. And Jim, I'll have to, we'll bounce some ideas off of you here as far as like, okay, look at the value proposition of this. You're a Mac user. Imagine you have a MacBook Pro. By the way, I never even asked you what became of that MacBook Pro. We'll get into that in the after show, but you have a MacBook Pro or some other like small laptop like this one here that primarily just has USB Type-C. Now, this is an exceptional thin and light for one very special reason. It actually has a USB Type A port on it, which you may or may not be able to see right now. This is like a unicorn, a 2019 thin and light laptop with a USB Type A port on it. But the other side is just two Type-Cs and that's it. You have to use one of them for charging. So, I mean, you get a laptop like this, or you get a MacBook that has literally like two USB Type-Cs on the side and that's it. And a dock becomes more than just a convenience. It becomes a necessity because then you actually have real I/O again. And I joked at some point in this review, I'm like, someday I will tell my grandchildren stories and they will roll their eyes because grandpa's at it again about the days when I had a laptop computer that had a full-sized HDMI on the side of it. And it's just like, what are you talking about? Everything's wireless now. But anyway, this one, instead of HDMI, and there's plenty of docks out there, like the Elgato mini dock that we kind of played around with here, has like a display port and an HDMI, and that can do two simultaneous if you're using Thunderbolt. This is both a USB-C dock and a Thunderbolt dock. If you plug it into a Thunderbolt capable laptop like the one that I'm using, this is the one I used to test it, it pops up with a dialog, asks you if you want to allow this Thunderbolt device, and then it's like ultra performance mode is enabled, where it will absolutely simultaneously output two 4K 60 DisplayPort feeds, so you can have dual monitor setup, and it has very good transfer speeds. I tested just like, I don't have any Thunderbolt drives specifically. I have like Gen 2 USB 3.1 stuff, 10 gigabit per second stuff. The transfer speeds were very close to what I would get just natively plugging into the side of the laptop. I mean, we're talking the difference between 950 megabytes per second and 930 with the same drive. So there seems to be a bit of overhead. I know there's overhead. It's kind of cool though. Actually, the StarTech, their specifications get really, really like granular, and they have every different chip. I had to send it back, so I didn't want to tear it apart because it looked like the bottom, which is like a nice rubber material to keep it from sliding around, that was kind of glued on, and I have to peel that back to get to the screws. But they have a list of all the chips that are in it. It's got a Titan Ridge chipset, that's the Thunderbolt, Cypress CCG5C, a Realtek RTL 8153, and it goes through all of it, like what the C Media chip is for audio. So it gives you dual display port out up to 60 hertz if you're on Thunderbolt. Absolutely not if you are on USB-C. At that point, the only way to get dual monitor, I think, would be two 1920 by 1200 max, or one 30 hertz 4K monitor. So to get the most out of this is Thunderbolt 3. But Jim, what I started to ask earlier, the list price of this is $337.99, which is high. And I look at like Mac, like OWC sells a similar dock for $299. The actual street price, if you go to Amazon and their like official Amazon page, $243. So now it's right in the middle of those $200 to $300 Thunderbolt 3 docks. I felt like pricing was good. Like, it seems like a lot of money, but if you actually go out and look at Thunderbolt 3 with dual 60 hertz output capability and similar connectivity to this, it's not a bad price. I think it makes that OWC dock look kind of expensive in comparison. Obviously, the list price of the StarTech is higher than the the OWC dock. But I mean, just for Mac users alone, looking around at something to expand a MacBook or like a Mac Mini or something, like this is not a bad deal.
No, I mean that the pricing. I mean, I don't want to say it's good because all this stuff is way too expensive, but it's in line with its competitors. I think for this one, having that USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 option is something I don't think I've seen that before. There's USB-C docks and there's Thunderbolt 3 docks.
Right. That was the I won't say the gimmick, but their spiel about this, their actual pull quote is, for the first time, so they're saying this is a first, there's a plug-and-play Thunderbolt 3 docking station that intelligently adapts to your Thunderbolt 3 or USB-C laptop. So it has like its own internal mode that it goes into depending on what it's connected to. So that is a little bit unusual. There are Thunderbolt 3 solutions out there that are not USB-C compatible for sure, and then vice versa. So
yeah, and I haven't tested a Thunderbolt 3 dock pretty much this year, but tested a lot of them, Thunderbolt 3 and prior generations. I don't think I ever saw one that was both. So that is a good feature. Yeah. I think, and again, I haven't looked at the pricing in a while. CalDigit has a dock that is really good, really solid at about $199, I think. And it can do dual 4K 60. And I don't recall exactly the port selection on like USB and stuff, but I reviewed it a couple of years ago and it was good. So there's options out there. The key with these are, not all of them are reliable. A lot of companies, especially in their first gen products, like there were just quirks where it would disconnect a port or not charge or whatever. And so, as long as, it seemed like you had a good experience with this and your usage of it. So, that's a good sign, but, the pricing seems right on at its street price of about $240.
Yeah. And that's where I thought, so just looking around, that $200 mark seems to be kind of the baseline for stuff like this. And, they have very good support from what I've been able to tell. I've never actually had to use StarTech support for anything. I've bought their stuff before. I was actually looking around on their website just to see, do they still sell like internal PC speakers and stuff anymore? And they don't. You could buy a socket A heatsink and cooler for your Thunderbird, Athlon 1200, brand new today. But you cannot buy a PC speaker, unfortunately. Some of the really, really old legacy stuff is finally gone, and they're moving in this direction, like a lot of the more modern accessories like this. But
wouldn't just a new 2-inch tweeter work?
How dare you? It doesn't have the bass. Look, if you're playing internal PC speaker games, you want that full-bodied PC speaker sound. You can put a beeper on the board, but that's obnoxious. And you want at least, I would say, a 2 to 3 inch driver in there. For all the bass you get from a 3-inch paper cone driver screwed to the inside of a metal case.
Oh, screw it very loosely to the inside of the case.
Yeah, then you get that like trunk rattle effect.
Yes. Pretend it's just because of the heavy
bass rattle. Okay.
All right, well, so that's if you're looking for something like this, and I am not, because to answer Sebastian's initial question, I still don't have any Macs working at the moment.
Really? The MacBook Pro 15 is still not working.
They took it in, they looked at it, they said that it was because it was out of warranty by about a month, and they said, well, I can't authorize it, but we could send it to our depot and see what they say. And I didn't want to give it up. I wasn't ready, so I said never mind.
Why would you give up a dead MacBook? I mean, why would you?
Well, I still had data on there that I was trying to recover with target disk mode, and so I came home and haven't had a chance to look at any other options yet. So I've just been
I'm sorry to laugh at your plight, but it isn't funny.
It's funny.
It's not funny.
This has forced me to go all Windows with my media stuff. I use Windows as like my day-to-day, but I always did all the video editing on Final Cut, and I've been doing Premiere the last couple of weeks and got the hang of it, and it's working. So
hey,
And yes, North Ranger in the Discord chat, has been recommended to me by many people. I need to contact Louis Rossman, the amazing New York City based repair guy who regularly shames Apple. And
Yes.
I probably will.
He does something to Apple that starts with an S, but SH. But yes.
But I probably will do that. I just haven't had a time. I'm gonna give Apple another chance to fix it, but when I have time to deal with it and see if they'll do it for free. And if they won't, then I'll go talk to Lewis and see if he can. I can send it to him or something. But yeah.
There's you know what? There's a ThinkPad for you, Jim. I think if you examine Lenovo's current product offerings, you'll find that whether it's an IdeaPad, a ThinkPad, they have a wide selection, and we are not sponsored by them.
Unfortunately, no.
Yet.
Yeah.
If you're watching Lenovo. The T490S. You know what, you guys? You knocked it out of the park. The T490S. I got to write that review up.
I will say I would switch, except I still have yet to find a PC laptop with a trackpad that is as good as the MacBook. For all
may I introduce you to the nub?
No, I can use. I don't want the nub. I want a trackpad. I use the nub.
Everyone loves the nub.
It's got its uses, but when it comes to that trackpad, of all of Apple's idiotic hardware decisions, the one thing that they've gotten right that for whatever reason no other PC company can get right is that trackpad. It just doesn't feel the same.
It doesn't. Wait, it doesn't feel the same on another device? Or you're saying that Apple's current trackpads? I feel like Apple's trackpads have just gotten better, it seems. Any ones that I've used, because they keep on getting bigger. They're basically just iPhone screens embedded into the MacBook. So the capacitive touch, the touch points, the accuracy, the acceleration, all of that stuff with a MacBook trackpad that I've used is absolutely the best in the industry. It's when you get into their obsession with making the keyboard as unreliable and shitty as possible that then I just can't go down the MacBook road, because I can't stand the idea of I push down on like the H key one day and it doesn't come back up, and then the E key stops working, and just I don't want to deal with that. Plus it's too integrated now. And of course this is another one of those, I'm just showing my age here, but I can't stand the idea that if the logic board has an issue, that's the CPU, that's the memory, that's like 90% of the cost right there.
Aside from the memory, and that again is only on select computers, any modern PC laptop is going to be the same. It's all an SoC on one board, generally soldered. I mean,
for the thin and light stuff, yes. Yeah. When you go to the lower powered DDR3, like LPDDR-C stuff, you have to go to a gaming laptop to get just like actual SODIMMs, and I get that. That's not an option with any Mac laptop. Even if you buy like a desktop replacement style MacBook Pro 15-inch, you're still getting soldered memory. You're still getting their proprietary connector for a PCI Express storage solution. So you can't just put your own M.2 drive in there. So,
no, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, the options are vastly superior on the PC side. It's just and that's, if this doesn't go well and I end up having to pay a lot of money for this MacBook, or I'm asked to pay a lot of money, I may just give it up entirely.
But that 16-inch, once you see that shiny new 16-inch MacBook Pro, Jim, you're going to start to feel those feelings again. And I don't know. I guess I don't get up for Apple products quite the same way without Steve on the stage, convincing me that I need it. The reality distortion field has been broken. Yeah, they never should have gotten rid of Scott Forstall, because that's true. He was the heir apparent. He would have been out there just selling it.
Now the difference was you're just as captivated by Scott, but you were scared to death. Like, he scared the crap out of you. Like, oh my God, I better give him my wallet. I'm terrified of this man.
Very big eyes. Like, he would open them so wide when he was talking, like he was looking into the back of your soul.
Speaking of being terrified, I know you guys talked last week about it, but Panos Panay, Microsoft's Surface leader and keynote giver, he gives me the willies. I mean, his style is very I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but the way he will pause and focus on words and slow his speech and then stare at you in the audience, and it's like, okay, you're really passionate about this stuff, but it's an experience.
Palmer-esque.
If you haven't watched the Panos keynote, go look it up because it's crazy. But all right, let's jump into the picks of the week. Sebastian, do you have one? Did I see you add one there?
I didn't come up with one. I could grab something stupid, but I'll spare everybody.
Well,
All right.
as is tradition.
Yeah. Well, hey, we'll see what I come up with.
All right, so I'll start. This is less of a specific product you can buy, but something cool I saw that you could recreate if you were so inclined. And this was something posted over at the Star Trek subreddit, and it's a custom Star Trek keyboard. So you see you've got 10 forward on the space bar, the enter key is engage, shift is shields. Looks like it would be your Windows keys, like a Deep Space Nine thing, the alt keys, the Federation symbol, Vulcan salute on the control key there.
Where's the log button?
Yeah.
How can it not have a log button?
There you go. There's a couple things like make it so is missing. But the guy who posted this, he said that the way he got this done was he used a site called, if I can, oops, didn't mean to zoom in there. Nope, wrong way. There we go. It's the WASDkeyboards.com, WASD keyboards. And so they sell mechanical keyboards, but their distinguishing factor is you can send them, they'll sell you a blank set of keycaps, and then you send them some vector graphics, and they'll print them on the keycaps for you, and they'll customize it. You can get, hardwood hand rests and braided cables and all different styles. So if you wanted to recreate the Star Wars key or Star Trek keyboard, or if you wanted to do Star Wars or Harry Potter or something worshiping the Chinese government, you can do that. You can go and find and create whatever kind of thing you want. So WASD keyboards, and then of course I'll have that link to the custom Star Trek keyboard if you want to take a crack at recreating that. All right, Jeremy, what do you got for us?
Well, oddly enough, I mean, the 3800 X's have not only been remaining in stock in Canada, we're getting discounts on the bloody things now. It's not a huge discount, but $490 for a 3800X with the fancy cooler is just not bad. But if you can accept, that maybe you can't afford the next generation newest thing, the price on one of our old favorites, the 2700 Non-X, is beautiful. It's $220. Yeah, it's not the newest thing on the market, but at that price, buy a fancy motherboard, buy that, and then pick up a third generation Ryzen later on when you can afford it.
Sure.
They're just really good deals.
Or I might even say, considering the somewhat shaky nature of X570 right now with all these BIOS updates, get yourself that Ryzen 3000 now, put it on your X470 board, and then you can get to, when things settle and get a little more solid on X570, you go out and you pick that up, get your PCI 4 goodness there. But
I'm a proponent of Ryzen 3000 on X470. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
It just works. TM.
Did you find something for us?
I did. I found this website about, I don't know, 18 years ago called ebay.com. And one of the things you can do on eBay is search the world for stuff that no one in their right mind would ever buy or keep if they did buy it. And one of the things I've done in the last few months that I've just never had time to work on, I don't know if you remember, I took a week off a week or two ago, and my kid got sick. I didn't get to do that many fun things. We had to cancel some of our plans, but I did take a few minutes of my time to install the CMS chips in my Sound Blaster 2.0 card. Now, there's a seller in, I think, Poland, and they took forever to arrive, who sells just the chips that you need to populate the empty spaces in a Sound Blaster 2.0 card with the original chips that give you the CMS audio, which is in certain old classic games. And CMS was the creative music system. And, you know, a sane person who, for some reason, is interested in this could go on YouTube and just listen to CMS versus Sound Blaster versus AdLib audio. But now I can just do it myself if I ever get around to putting this in a PC and seeing if the chips actually worked. So
Is that an ISA card?
It is. Yeah, it's a Sound Blaster 2.0. So this is the 8-bit like version. It's not the Sound Blaster 16. So I mean, it doesn't do stereo, doesn't do your fancy stereo audio, but you know, it does what it needs to do. It's got a real OPL chip in it, and it has beautiful FM synthesis, pretty much exactly the same as an AdLib card, which are unbelievably expensive. However, there are very good replica AdLibs you can buy for starting around $75 now. You know, the list just goes on. Like, you could buy yourself on this eBay site, you could buy yourself an Intel overdrive kit. Now, I have more than one, of course, but this particular one, and this just has a couple of things in it, but this tool right here, this is impossible to find on its own. It looks like a lice comb, and I'm sure Intel would appreciate me saying that. This is a chip puller specifically for Intel CPUs of the time. And if you remember, or if you even know this, you couldn't always just use a zero insertion force socket. You actually had to use quite a bit of force to get your CPU down into the socket, and then getting it out was a nightmare. You try to pry it up from one side and you bend the pins on the other side. So this thing just lets you kind of like ease it up on one side, ease it up on the other side, pop it out of there. And you can take your like 486 SX out of your system, throw in a DX4 100, you know, if your system supports it. So just stuff like that. I mean, check out ebay.com, not a sponsor, to buy
you
stuff
don't
like
break
this.
a bonsai fork and get yelled at.
Yeah,
Because little bonsai rakes were also about the right size.
I will admit, though it will probably ruin any credibility I may actually have left, that I've used a flathead screwdriver before to pull chips. So, I mean, I kind of put it in and twisted it slightly to get the chip to rise, and I did bend the pins on the other side of it. So,
what a shill.
Sorry.
Shameless. All right. Well,
Intel did not provide the CPU removal kit. I had to buy it myself on eBay.
actually, related to that, I think I heard Intel is removing a bunch of old BIOS and support drivers. They may have actually already happened, but like from that era, there was a bunch of stuff still archived on their website that was removed recently or is about to be removed. So if I can find a reference to that, I'll put a link in the show notes. And then if you've got that old stuff, go and archive it. I'm sure it is, or I would hope it is available elsewhere, that all this stuff has been mirrored at some point. But, you know,
maybe it's still on their FTP
systems,
and it's just not on their site anymore. It saddens me when companies do this. Like HP finally took down all the compact stuff that people have been linking to in forums forever. So now it's like, oh yeah, you need the soft pack number 6847. And that includes the BIOS for your system, because of course on many of these compact desktops, there is no actual BIOS resident on the board. There's a basic, there's enough to get the board running, but there's no way to interface with it. So you actually have to have a hidden partition on your C drive somewhere that can access all of the setup functions, or have rescue floppies, which were all part of like a specific soft pack that was related to your desktop model. And I've tried to, in the years past, I would try to work on a system and like, why can't I enter the setup? I'm hitting F10. That's the compact button for setup. What's going on here? Oh, I changed the hard drive. The hidden partition's gone. The soft pack is no longer available for that. I don't have the restore CD for this system. I'm screwed. So, please, companies, are hard drives that expensive? The entire library of drivers from like the 1990s would fit onto one like 2 terabyte hard drive probably, but
well, it's
fortunately it'd have to be FAT16, so it'd have a lot of problems.
That's true.
How dare you? Did you say hoarder, Jim? And
data
holding data hoarder.
Hoarder. It's up to the data hoarders.
Yeah, we won't even go into
Next, you'll tell me I can't fix this Toshiba satellite.
There are certain Toshiba satellites that are very desirable for retro gaming, Jeremy. It depends on the mix, whether or not it had an integrated sound card, what the default resolution of the screen is, whether it's active matrix or passive matrix LCD. So,
well, one of these days we'll get PC Per Retro going, as we threatened to do numerous
PC
times.
Per Retro, aka PC Per Rewind. I've been amassing a collection of stuff, and we could just slowly pan across it, and that would be episode 1.
Yep. Of course, we got to get that retro wave music for the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, that's the show, folks. Thanks for joining us. Again, we do these Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern, 2 a.m. UTC. And you can join us at pcper.com/live, where we have the embedded YouTube video and chat. Or you can head on over to pcper.com/subscribe so you know when we go live. And of course, in our show notes, every show note has a link to our Discord server. So if you're on Discord, please feel free to join us there. We've got a good community going there. I'm learning how to use it, how to set up channels and certain features. So come on over and watch me struggle. It'll be fun. But we're so glad you could join us. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.